Brilliant. Okay, so welcome everyone. I think everyone knows me from the last show and tell, but my name is Dawn Turner and I'm a designer and researcher here at Unboxed. This is our second research and development show and tell for the Improving Local Authority Building Control Alpha. Our agenda for today, we're going to be talking about the different areas we've been working on during the last couple of weeks and what's coming up in the next sprint. There's also going to be an opportunity at the end for questions. Okay, so the Alpha Vision. This is something we started to create at the workshop last month and we have since refined. So we want to demonstrate how we can deliver a better user experience while also improving the quality and usefulness of data. And so we can be in a position, and so we can position local authorities as a service provider of choice. Okay, so I'm going to start with user research. This is the area that I've been working on. What we set out to do, so we are focusing on the full plans journey for our prototype. We had lots of great research from the discovery, which has really helped us to look at the overall environment. But for Alpha, to help us prototype, we really wanted to break down the process into tasks and understand the sequence, the flow. This will help us to identify patterns, including ones that already exist, and work out how they fit together. So over the past couple of weeks, we have spoken to 8 people made up of surveyors. These are focused on internal users. So this is surveyors and technical support officers. Thank you to everyone who's helped us with the recruitment. We really appreciate that. So we have spoken to 4 surveyors, but actually 6 surveyors because 2 of those actually had management responsibility. Mainly based in London, split between 2 authorities, but we've also spoken to Central Building Control and we'll be having one more interview later this week. We've also made sure we spoke to users with a range of experience so we could understand how their needs may vary as they move through the process. That's been really interesting. Okay, so what we've learned. We've managed to break down the journey into common tasks. As I mentioned, that's what we were set out to do, so we can join them together and understand who's involved. We now have a better understanding of the actions that must take place to progress a case, i.e. at what point letters or emails are sent to customers. We've also started looking at information and data, so what is captured, when and how it's documented, passed on and also stored, which is an important consideration for us moving forward to ensure it's kept secure. It's also been interesting to learn how surveyors work based on their experience. So much happens using prior knowledge and awareness of regulations, so how they work or the resources they may need can vary, for example, during plan checking and inspections. We've also learnt how more complex cases can lead to more bespoke case management, from setting the fees to, say, additional checks that may need to happen during inspections. And finally, it was just really helpful to hear firsthand the challenges that staff face navigating the process. For example, the points at where duplication happens and why, so we can take those learnings forward with us for our prototype. And last thing in this section, I want to start thinking about recruitment for the next phase of our research, where we're going to be focusing on customers. So ideally, we'd like to speak to some clients, maybe homeowners or organisations for whom the work has been done. So say a shop or a restaurant owner, principal designers, so architects or other building professionals, and also principal contractors, so builders or the contractors managing that. Ideally, we'd like a mix of, in terms of the case sizes that they have and complexity, but it would also be good to achieve a spread in terms of location, so we don't focus just on London-based customers. As with the research before, there'll be 45-minute sessions over Google Meet, and any help you can give us to recruit would be much appreciated. I've posted on Slack, but I'll follow up with an email to everyone on the invite list, and I'll include a link to a booking link to my calendar. So thanks for that. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Tom.
very much. And so I wanted to just talk a bit about how the insights that Dawn and Rhiannon and myself have been gathering, how those have been feeding into the process working towards prototyping, which is where we'll end up in a second. So moving on, Dawn. The journey map has been built from a service blueprint that was created at the discovery phase. So there was a sort of journey there for full plans already. This was obviously sort of relatively high level, and as Dawn's indicated, we were starting to fill in some of the gaps. There were a bunch of assumptions or questions we had that we wanted to either verify or get a response to, just to help build out a deeper picture of this journey and some of the nuances that are happening there. Particularly, I suppose, those nuances that might be associated with experience or with the variety of different types of case. So if we move on, we use this journey map to bring together a series of user stories. So that's trying to look at this flow of actions that lead us through the receipt of a full plans application, the design check, the plan check, and on into the site inspections and completion. That flow we wanted to break down into these user stories, which help us understand as sort of discrete actions what's trying to be achieved and what the ultimate benefit is. And from those user stories, we also wanted to put together into some kind of structure, so we knew what the steps were broadly across the process, so we can start to get an idea of what the architecture might look like, how we're going to guide people through this process. And you can see here a sort of a proposal for an architecture of this sort of end-to-end service through from the customer preparation, their submission and pay journeys, the receipt of that into the back office at a local authority, and then the steps that a local authority building control would need to take from the sort of the validation or the checking of what they've received, any consultation activities, the plan or design check, determination of notices, inspection and completion. So these are a proposal. Some of these might end up getting merged. They will probably almost certainly get renamed. But they give us a good way to start to sort of structure and ask questions in our user research and in our testing with surveyors, inspectors, technical support, as well as customers, principal contractors, etc. And one of the things these user stories and these this sort of architecture has done is allowed us to identify patterns where we know there are ways of helping a local authority officer, case officer, to perform these tasks, whether that's checking what's in a document, whether that's asking for extra information, whether that's around, identifying locations, managing geospatial data and information. And so we went through these user stories across that whole back office journey, at least initially, and identified where, looking on the back office planning system as a sort of an exemplar for how these kind of case management tools might be built, where there's existing resources and tools that could meet these user needs. And we've sort of found a good mapping of these features to that. And then if we move on to the prototyping, this has meant that we can have we can sort of go further faster in terms of our prototyping approach. And we're going to use a bit of a mix of prototyping approaches. So where we have existing patterns and we can build on what's been done before, we can draw on well-documented research and development that's open source. We will use code to create those prototypes. And yet where we don't yet have patterns, or where we're drawing on patterns that might exist outside of the scope of what we have access to the code for, we might be using paper and clickable prototypes. And then, so this might look, if we go forwards, like this in terms of what you would expect to see in terms of coded prototype or sketching or clickable prototypes across the whole journey, where we reckon that for a decent chunk of this process, we can have some kind of coded prototype, which will be backed up and supported in the sort of more experimental or newer or more bespoke areas by paper-based or clickable prototypes as well. And hopefully this will allow us to get a good good value from our testing. And on this point on the coded prototype, I'm going to hand over to Rhiannon for some exciting developments.
Yes, so what you see here is a very, very basic coded prototype of what a back office application might look like that would allow building control officers to work on building control applications. It's got a login area. It's not divided up into what we call multi-tenanted hosting per council or anything like that, because this is very, very, very much a prototype that we're going to use, as Tom said, for rapid prototyping and iteration. I've added some initial validation tasks, which working with Dawn and Tom in coming sprints, we're going to actually decide what these might actually look like, but we have the basic foundational code in here to quickly implement these tasks that we can build into the prototype. It's also worth noting at this point that this prototype is absolutely not designed for entering real building control applications into, in the sense that it's not for adding anything that might be confidential or contain PPI. It's purely for entering realistic applications in, so that we can learn, rapidly iterate and produce further prototypes. So this is what we will be building on going forward. Also, one of the things that I've been doing during this sprint is thinking about data standards. So perhaps we can move on to thinking about this. Yes, so done quite a lot of research into what the current state of play with building control data looks like. Had some absolutely great help with this, and have been able to share one of the research documents I produced, and have added to it based on some of our findings from interviews, which has been really helpful. So just to reiterate, why are we so hung up on talking about data? Well, so much of the current data landscape, a lot of important information, the majority of it is captured within documents and drawings, obviously, but even really basic things like address data is not consistent. And this matters for different reasons. It matters because we are as a whole unable, for example, to analyze bodies of data in a meaningful way because they're not consistent. It means that systems are not interoperable with each other. And of course, it means that we have a very thorny problem that when private sector companies who are working on building control either cease trading or need to hand data over, they're not doing it in a way where the data can be easily transferred into local authority systems. So there are many compelling reasons to think about what the current landscape is and how we might move towards something with more consistency and less ambiguity. So one of the things that I've worked on in this sprint is taking a look at MHCLG's planning data standards. Now, obviously, planning data and building control data have some overlaps, but very, very, very different beasts. However, the work that's been done by MHCLG is really useful, particularly when it comes to things like avoiding ambiguity around addresses and so on. So I've added to the repository where the prototype is stored a data directory where we can start expanding some documents and thinking around this. And one of the first things I've done is taken MHCLG's planning data standard and done some gap analysis between that and the building control data that's currently submitted via planning portal forms, just to see what the sort of things that we can add, and also the sort of things in MHCLG's planning data standard that are not relevant to building control at all. We want to avoid obviously having a very prescriptive approach, but at the same, so we will be having more conversations with you and your colleagues in future sprints to enhance this further and see what recommendations we can make. And also the prototype is going to be a really useful place to for us to consume data constructed according to this standard and see how we can work with it in the prototype. And that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So it just leaves us to talk about what is upcoming. So Dawn's already talked a little bit about the upcoming user research and that move towards that, I suppose, front office or front end of the journey, which I think we'll also be sort of turning to in terms of our user journeys and our prototyping as well. As we've sort of completed most of our sort of back office interviews, we will be doing some iteration to the user journey, to the prototypes based on our findings from those. We will be coming back, hopefully with some of those prototypes to do some testing and further learning later on in the project. So that isn't the end of our engagement, but just sort of the end of the first phase as we start to roll some of those findings back into our work. We'll continue to be prototyping, and we'll hopefully get some of these prototypes into your hands. So if you're interested in testing things, then you know, keep an eye out on Slack or get in touch with us. We're really keen to get as many people as possible giving us feedback and thoughts. We're going to be carrying on with some of the work on the data standards, and we're also looking to involve both local authority and private sector partners to contribute to that. You know, this is not going to be something that's going to be totally resolved within the scope of an alpha, but I think we can set some really good foundations, learning from some of the best practice that is happening elsewhere to accelerate where we go with that. And we've got our next workshop in person coming up on the 28th of January in Lichfield. So we'll be preparing and working towards that as well. So I think there is just time for questions and suggestions, but maybe we can pause the recording and then we can take any questions from there.